not about spaceships. It's not about spaceships. It's not about spaceships. It's not about spaceships.
Hey everyone, I'm Jason Ward, and this is my buddy Rob, and we are here to talk about Star Wars today. And I don't know if anybody's in the chat yet, but the chat is on, so people can join it. I accidentally left the goofy-ass live StreamYard thing on because we were talking about that before the show, but now it's staying the whole time. I guess we'll just leave it until we fix it. But anyways, yeah, you've been reading it's called the Star Wars Archives?
Yeah, there's 2 Star Wars Archives book and separated by a trilogy. So there's one for the original trilogy and one for the prequel trilogy. They go by dates, like 99 to 2005.
Okay.
And I'm reading the 99 to 2005 one right now.
Okay, so then therefore I do have my wires crossed, and that's not the one that will have the sequel.
I will get the other one.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, no, I want to get him too, and then you're probably gonna be sick to death of me hearing about stuff that you read last month or something by the time I pick it up.
Not really, because I prefer having like you have such a unique take that you ever hear sometimes someone give you an opinion on something and it seems obvious. Oh yeah, Of course I would have thought that, but you never thought that. I mean, whatever you read, you're gonna have a different interpretation that I think would be. I mean, I'll appreciate hearing, for certain.
Thanks, man. Yeah, so today, based off of the 2 images that you sent over that you found interesting, I thought it would be a good day to talk, at least lightly in some way, depending on how it goes, about like politics in Star Wars. And the idea for the episode for me, anyway, feel free to do whatever you want, is not to beat people over the head with it. Who, sometimes people will say Star Wars is not political, not my Star Wars, not political. And it's like, maybe they're sincere, but at the same time, if they are, they're just overlooking something. They're not seeing something in the deeper subtext of the stories, of the prequel trilogy in particular. So my thinking is, let's not be huge jerks about it for once. Let's talk about what's actually there. Let's talk about how they actually tried to contextualize the galaxy, how it was political, and then, what does that mean? What does that mean for fans who are, watching it today and are livid when they sense something politically active is in play? Because if you want to look at a script as a living text or a movie as a text, not as necessarily like a film, but just as a text document itself, it's always sort of in the past. It's like Star Wars happened when I was a child. Therefore, the politics of it are not my politics. I feel removed from it. But in truth, it's not that isn't true. The politics of Vietnam still pertain to the politics of the kids who went to Afghanistan, and then still pertain to the kids who will go to the next skirmish. And it's not always the same. It's not always the same context, but it is literally the same relationship between people and the state. And Star Wars,
sort of specific example, like the difference would have been, because George was a different writer in the 70s than he was in the 90s. And you 20 years, although now 20 years is like, I guess it's a long time, but it really is.
Wait, I want to stop you right there really quickly. Carl says, yesterday Jason was a lot quieter than Rob. Today it's the opposite. Haha.
Okay.
So maybe we're overcompensating on trying to fix yesterday's levels. It's really difficult to try to mix a show when you're not in the same room, it turns out. All right, but I've also rearranged my room. So if anybody was frustrated yesterday, rearranged my room, and now I'm right up on this Shure SM7B like a Michael Jackson. Hee hee.
Yeah, I turned it down a bit, so I just want to see, guys. Just let me know if it's better now. So
yeah,
I got a lot more gain I can throw on this mic. It's not.
We should give Mike Pappas the job of being our in the chat mixer, since he stops by about every day and says what's up. You should just be like, levels are good, guys. That way we don't have to waste time with it.
I know. I know. I just think after this week we'll have it worked out. Like it's just a little bit of trial and error. I do re-listen to the shows while
Thank
I'm
you.
drawing, so I'm like, all right, yeah, that chill out, like Rob, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try not to because I don't want to fall into it's like I have two modes, and one mode is listening to the show to get better, to critique myself, and then falling into a spiral of self-hate. And then so it's like I have to balance those things or I won't do the show. So I have to I got to be real thick-skinned when I go back and listen to them, but I do feel like they are getting a little bit better every now and then. So as long as
All
we're
right.
getting
Well,
better.
I think I think I'm definitely louder, so I'll just continue on that train of thought. And if I'm off, just let me know, folks.
Yeah,
I'll
we're
say
talking
something.
about politics, Star Wars, not being jerks about it necessarily. If you're an asshole, we'll be assholes back. But
So a very early example, before I get to what I pulled out of the book, would be that Lucas made no joke about how Newt Gunray was his nod to Newt Gingrich, who was Speaker of the House for the GOP in the 90s. And I think had the Lucas of the 90s been writing Star Wars in the 70s, Tarkin very well would have been called Tonkin from the Gulf of Tonkin. You know what I mean? Like I think that that's an easy like one vowel change, you know?
well, and even to like take it further, Newt is Gingrich. Gunray is Reagan. It's
Reagan,
Ronald
right.
Reagan turned around. Senators Lott, Lott Dodd is Senators Lott and Senators Dodd. And basically he was just kind of if you were in his eyes a sellout, he was dropping you into a little stoogey sycophant who's down to sell democracy to the first Sith Lord who would pay them some money. And that's essentially like what he was doing in that way. And then but before that, I mean, you have Return of the Jedi. He makes no bones about it, and from Star Wars to Jedi: The Making of a Saga, when he says it's like the Vietnam War, where the Vietnamese didn't have the best weapons, but they basically had heart, and with sticks and stones in the poetry of it, they were able
He
to turn the weapons of imperialization against the West.
And he repeats that on the Attack of the Clones audio commentary, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
During the clone battle, when the clone troopers first drop, and you're getting those like Vietnam kind of like track zooms, you know, zoom shot. You get a couple of those sort of documentary style bits. And if I remember right, he shot all of the Vietnam sequences on American Graffiti too.
Right.
So like I'm like I gotta imagine like I mean again like to think that he's removed from that is sort of ridiculous. But look, I've said before, like with the sequel trilogy, like with The Last Jedi, I think it's the most complete film. I shed a tear at the end with the whole Luke sequence. I thought it was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Not my favorite film though. Like I thought it started great, but the thing that I didn't understand people complained about was the whole sequence where they're at the casino and it's like businesses are intertwined with the government and they're selling parts and different equipment to fund wars for profit.
Yeah.
And I think Ryan got a lot of flack for that. And I was like, that's the most Lucasy part of all of this. I think like that is something Lucas would have based if Lucas was really writing the sequel trilogy and in the frame of mind he had with the prequels, I think that would have been the basis for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Like, in
no,
my opinion.
That's when you go just a few years, very short years before the sequel trilogy, when you get into what he was doing with the Clone Wars in the Mandalorian arcs, he basically has things like private industry coming in, and it sounds really lame because it kind of is in a way. The way it was, in a way, the story itself is lame, but it's like, oh, we're basically giving food to kids, and it's at a discount for more profits, and it's poisoning the children of Mandalore. But what is kind of politically radical about it is he is literally going to children and saying, these people will poison you for profit. Don't trust them. That's what he's saying to basically a whole Cartoon Network generation of Star Wars fans in those episodes. And for better or worse, that's the story he told. And that's what he was doing with a children's cartoon just months or 2 years through 3 years before the sequel trilogy. So I honestly think in a lot of ways, had it gone the other way, we would have had a more political sequel trilogy with Lucas. But you brought in, I got both of the images up, and on this stupid program, it only lets you load in one at a time. So I'm going to put the first one up that you brought in. This is what I think is the first one.
So this comes from the section on Attack of the Clones. So the books are broken up 160 pages each for each film. So 160 pages for The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, in order. And this comes at the very tail end of Attack of the Clones. Paul Duncan here is the author of the book. And he brings up a cut scene in Attack of the Clones. He says, as you have said, this is a mystery story about who is manipulating events and who wields the power. There's a line in Padme's discussion with Dooku, a scene that was cut, where she tells him, what is happening here is not government that has been bought out by business. It's business becoming government, which is an actual line that was originally in the script. So Lucas replies, if you ascribe to the idea that most businesses are greedy, then it's very easy to see that they're more on this side, the dark side, than the light side and compassion. In business, the stockholder comes first. Everything is dedicated to making more money to the stockholder. There was an article in the paper the other day that I find ironic, where the banks have decided that they need to support the towns and cities where they're located, that their customers and people in general, rather than just working for themselves and the stockholders. What a realization.
Right.
So before we move on to, I mean, like that right there, like just the line that the line was in there. It's not government that's been bought out by business, but it's business becoming government. And I mean, I think that's really evident when you look back on Attack of the Clones, and they have that council, the separatists, with the different, where the techno union, right? Like,
yeah.
Like the EDM group lobbying group got together to, the Rave Star was formed. And,
right. In San Diego in the 90s, did you guys have Housers?
Housers?
Yeah. So we had this thing in Long Beach, and it was I think it was Cambodian refugees mostly who came to Long Beach like in the 80s. And they all became like EDM style dancers, and they were called Housers. They were all like super nice, but they would just like be like walking to class, and all of a sudden this dude would just like get down on the floor and start like doing some kind of like breakdancing that was like a combination of like what you would see in New York on a top of a box, and something that the Cambodian kids made up, but they called themselves Housers. And I've been thinking about that since that Clone Wars or Bad Batch episode a few days ago, when that guy's name sounds like Hauser.
Right,
that
right.
clone.
Yeah, so in San Diego, I grew up in Lakeside, which is like it's the Tatooine of, I mean, or almost the Mos Eisley of San Diego. Like it's on the outskirts and it's rural. And then I went to high school in Santee, which is unfortunately where they had the shooting years later, which was like a suburb, And then we would drive into San Diego. So my dad worked security in San Diego, so he'd drive 20, 30 miles every night.
Right.
To work. So like I'd go from rural to metropolis every night, and back and forth. And so it was different experience, but I didn't come across Housers. Did they have like the balls of light?
No, they were just pretty much like mostly Cambodian, like hip hop kids.
Hip hop, yeah, like they get the cardboard, do the breakdance.
Yeah, but no cardboard. They would just straight up just like drop down in the middle of the floor and do it. I mean, for as big of assholes as high school had, those guys were cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. I really wanted to be a breakdancer when I was a little kid, and then I hurt myself trying to do that. That end.
Yeah, Comic Artist Pro Secrets is here, so everybody's gonna get mad at me. It says, Jason, is it possible that the political divide in Star Wars right now is all about people trusting Lucas's nuance and subtlety and not trusting the new regime? That is a fair question. I will say that as far as like politics goes, number one is the point of this is that it's always been there. It's the audience who gets mad, I think, when they figure out that Lucas's politics don't align with theirs. Like I know you're very conservative and I'm very liberal, and in that way I have it kind of easy because Lucas is a San Francisco liberal. A lot of people don't know what that is, and I know that you do. But basically, if you go to San Francisco, the liberals there are in I don't radically liberal is one way of putting it. A little bit different with the .com techers and all that stuff that have taken over and ruined the rents there, but you get this sort of amalgamation of leftist, far left beliefs, but there is a huge contradiction in it that I will concede, and that's that they are all people who profit off of being extremely wealthy, and they make the most money off of very fiscally liberal policies. And so you end up with kind of a yuppie culture where it's kind of disgusting. Like when I was in San Francisco, I would meet punk kids, punk people that would go to shows, and that was cool. And I liked talking to them. But then when I would have to go to a fancier dinner with the ex or something like that, and you would be around those people, their leftist politics were were kind of strange. Well, George Lucas is in Marin County, which is super conservative. They have a private police department that will harass you when you drive down there if they think you don't belong, and it's an interesting place to say the least. With that, I do think that it has to do with the fact that most people who are apolitical, that's meaning like they don't really they don't have a dog in the fight as far as they're concerned. I think that they see Star Wars politics as being in the past. Then you have politics today, right? And people, like, if you were like on the Trump train, and then you see what's going on in these making these kind of political points, it does seem to be against Trump. Was it against Trump? Based off of the people that I know at Lucasfilm, yeah, it completely was. I mean, there is just no doubt about it. You could get plausible deniability on that and go, it just has to do with whoever was in power at the time was going to take the brunt of that. At the same time, it's no secret how any of them felt, myself included. And so, like, with that kind of stuff in mind, you do end up with a fan base who might go left, might go right. And Star Wars at the same time has always sort of been, I think, pro left. It's definitely, I'm going to say, accidentally socially conservative, like a kiss on the cheek. Like, they're not showing too much like scandalous stuff until at least not till Return of the Jedi, when you start getting nipple slips and Leia in the bikini. Before then, it's pretty much like, oh geez, you kissed me on the, everything's rated, very rated G. And then but when you get down to it, like the act of rebellion and those things right there in the context of those films is very much I think of the leftist 1960s generation. It really is. It is quintessentially some hippie shit.
Yeah, I
But
wonder how
he laughs.
escapist the first film would have seemed had it come out in, say, between 64 and 68. Because
Mm-hmm.
that movie comes out well after Watergate, and there's sort of like, as my uncles and my aunt, my mother used to sort of describe, there was almost like a cynical kind of like, who cares, kind of like attitude. And they were honestly like, American Graffiti was like their big nostalgia trip, which gave them Happy Days. So like my family, like, they lived and breathed Happy Days, man. Like I can't even begin to
Oh
tell
yeah.
you like how big that show was.
And then
Like,
Kasdan did the Big Chill and did it again for all those old yuppies.
yeah. So I just wonder though, like, if the politics in the first film would have been more evident during the height of of the civil rights movement between 64 68, right before the moon landing, right? Like because everyone was really charged at that point for immediate change happened now, in a way that this country is experiencing even today. I just think wonder if it would have been more evident than in say 77,
Yeah.
So just a
Yeah,
thought.
and I mean, and just to like throw it out there even further, I've been sent a ton of photos, and nothing that's like needs to be released or whatever, because it's all out there in some way already, but from the new Indiana Jones movie, and just tons of stuff like Welcome Home Buzz, like Buzz Aldrin and stuff like that
Oh, wow.
from, so that, which once again we knew it was going to go into the space race stuff. That was, I want to say, the Illuminati was the first site to drop that out. I want to say that's true, but I could be wrong. um and so when you put when you put that stuff there, and there's a college there too, by the way. One of the signs I saw was for a college, and so I think maybe that's where Indy's going.
Berkeley.
um no, it's actually, I think it's a made up college. I
Ravenwood.
actually, if it was Ravenwood, that would be a story. That would,
Right.
it's something new. I actually like got all of the images saved on here and was going to put them all up. But yeah, welcome Apollo 11 astronauts, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins. So giant leap for mankind, which I don't know if they would have had that on the sign yet or not. But so here's the college, is the Hunter College Bookstore, new and used books. And then above it's all End the War in Vietnam, Social Crisis at Home. So when you get down to it, this is Indiana Jones is going to, in a way, be dealing with Lucas's politics and Spielberg's politics. But
so Ford's character in American Graffiti played a cop in American Graffiti 2 that was beating up protesters.
yeah,
I wonder if they'd sneak that character in, like the young, because he wore like the same white motorcycle helmet that like the T-1000 was wearing in a way. Like if you go back and look at Ford dressed up in American Graffiti 2 as a cop, it very T2-ish, like
yeah,
slight odd thought,
yeah. What was his name? Bob something. I can't remember now.
Bob Fett. Like I think it was
Bob A. Fett.
Bob Bob Fett.
Yeah, I heard that, the opening of that Elvis song in the opening of part 4 of Crystal Skull, he wanted to have an American Graffiti and couldn't afford it. And so, yeah, back then it was that was one of the songs that was like serious money still. And to get into the movie, so when they did Indy 4 and it was set in that time, he was like, yeah, we're buying that. We're buying the rights to that song for this one. And so they threw that in there.
And they can afford Gophers now.
So that was essentially George Lucas's "fuck you" money moment on screen.
yeah. They couldn't afford Gophers on American Graffiti or that music.
Right. So okay, I'm gonna try to get the other image in here now. But yeah. Do you recall what the other image was about?
It continues the conversation. It gets way more into some of his thoughts on. I'll kind of like condense it a little bit.
Okay.
But I thought it was interesting because he goes on to say that banks have finally realized that they're part of a symbiotic relationship, which takes you back to the Phantom Menace, right? And it's the same in politics. He goes to say that we're all in a big symbiotic relationship with the rest of the world. As soon as one country says we're the only thing that's important, they aren't important, you start pulling threads that tear the world apart. They don't realize that when you shoot yourself in the foot, it hurts. I don't know what that. I guess what he's saying right there. How are we going to run the country without migrants? Didn't anybody tell you that they're the ones that do all the work? Ooh. And then I think like that alone right there though is interesting when he says that we're the only thing that's important. They aren't important. You start pulling the threads that tear the world apart. Would have been interesting if Naboo and all that stuff was more like we're about us more than the rest of the galaxy, right? Like if that had been a little stronger. Yeah, because they're kind of like just the victim in that scenario.
Apparently, it's not letting me add that image that you just read. So thankfully, you did read it, because
All right.
it's being a jerk for some reason. It's not showing up when I put it.
I'll read the last one when we talk about this, though. There's one last
Yeah.
quote.
Well, no, I think it's fair to say that when Lucas wrote The Phantom Menace, he was very, very much, he was more inclined to consider his themes than he had been on his previous works, where I think the themes were intuitive, sort of, they were more implied, and then through editing and through everything coming together, they sort of solidified themselves. In Phantom Menace, he goes with this theme of symbiosis. And so, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan have a symbiotic relationship that is disrupted when Anakin comes in. But you have the Gungans related to the Nabooians. Are they called Nabooians? The Naboo?
The Naboo.
Yeah, so you have that. You have both Sith, only two. Yeah.
Hold on. They're Nubians. Because Watto calls them a Nubian ship, which I have to wonder, was that him riffing on Chasing Amy?
Right.
Like, I've always wondered when he says, Nubian, I'm like, is that Lucas pointing a nod back at Kevin? Or
yeah.
Like, what's a Nubian?
yeah. Her ship is a Nubian. You're not wrong there. So they should be called Nubians. But aren't there actually Nubians in real life?
Yeah,
maybe that's
African. That's why they're on the Nubian god. And then he goes, "What's a Nubian?" And then Hooper goes to shoot the whole con down. It's the whole joke. But he was talking about Vader. He's a Nubian god.
Right?
What's a Nubian?
What's a Nubian?
Yeah, and then 2 years later, it's a ship in Star Wars. I mean, Lucas had to have seen that and laughed and put it in there.
Yeah, he did watch the movies. I remember him actually talking about it. When he ends up talking about Jay and Silent Bob, I think he gets the quote mixed up. But when he's talking about the Geonosians making the Death Star, he talks about that scene in Clerks where they talk about independent contractors. And he's like, well, actually, they were Geonosian. They were just bug people, and it didn't matter. My George Lucas voice sucks, but that's essentially what he said.
Well, they were migrants and they did all the work, but they didn't matter because this time they're bug migrants and we don't care. It's a bug's life.
But anyways, so he everything is about symbiosis, and he goes up to the macro of excuse me, the macro of the Republic and the people to the Nabooians or the Nubians and the Gungans, to the Sith,
I think
each other, and then all the way down to the midichlorian level, to the cellular.
I think though my point to this though is that's more rooted in biology, right? It comes off as a very biological thing, and what he's talking here is a social structure,
right?
Like the symbiotic relationship in terms of had like Naboo been Naboo was the breadbasket of the galaxy. Mm-hmm. Right, and so all the big food that was feeding Coruscant and the rest of the galaxy was being raised. They grew food the way I can't say
Kaminoans.
Can't say it.
The commode. They're called commode people.
The commodes.
The commodes.
The outhousers. So the loo, right?
Those guys.
Yeah, those guys. Like they make clones. What if Naboo made the food and there was a dispute between them and the trade? Like they weren't being paid enough, and the Trade Federation's like, we need to eat. Like if it was more rooted in that political social structure, because I think it would just make a little more sense, because there would have been a macro symbiotic relationship and a micro symbiotic relationship. Like even though you see that this planet is getting the shaft apparently. But on their planet, they would also be giving the shaft down to the Gungans, like it rolls downhill, right? Like,
yeah. And what I was gonna say was he was going with that symbiotic biological theme, and he was attempting to link that. And this is where I think you can be critical, because what he does is he implies what happens when the symbiotic social relationship is messed with, but then he doesn't show it. So one of the things about Phantom Menace where I can see as an editor where he thought, you don't need this. I could see where he was coming from, but I think as a writer, it was a huge mistake to not show the people of Naboo actually suffering. when you see like the Gungans not helping them and like they're being held hostage by a foreign invader. It's like even on Earth, and we'll probably talk about this on Saturday on the Alien Show, when we talk about UFOs again, is that it like Russia and the United States was under Reagan and Gorbachev, they had a little deal of hey, if an aliens ever invade Earth, we're teaming up, right? And they're like, oh yeah, hell yeah, dude. Russia and USSR and the United States, we're gonna it's gonna be like a tag team match from wrestling, you know,
They're
where
the mega powers. Right?
where Nikolai Volkov betrays and goes with Hogan. Like that was kind of like what they were selling at the time. For very briefly, just as like a nuanced gesture. Would it have happened? Who knows? But with that in mind, when the Trade Federation comes, Boss Nass is like, that's their problem. Take this idiot in the bongo and yeah, go deal with it. But we're not helping you. It's not until later on in the movie that that you see them come to the same conclusion that they're shooting themselves in the foot if they don't intervene. But of course, you have these like all of these threads and you're able to put it all together, but Lucas never actually like straight up does it. It's just like, look, it's almost like the RoboCop bad guys, like the RoboCop corporate guys, like
Dick
they're
Jones?
the worst. They're the worst. Like, yeah, Dick Jones sucks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and at the same time, you just see Dick Jones like doing bad stuff and whatever. And then you see that like the city's all messed up because Dick Jones don't give a fuck. Well, in this scenario, you end up with all of these like connections being laid out onto the table. The Nemodians, the evil Sith cultists that are coming in and buying it out, and it's all laid out, but then it never is really explained for the 5-year-old. And
yeah, had they been reaping the planet of their resources, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, we want your stuff, and they're like, we don't sell to you. We're a protected planet. You know, we have all this lush. Because like, I was always wondering, like, what are they blockading them from? Food? They seem to have plenty of everything. It's nice down there.
yeah,
Like, I couldn't figure out, like, if they wanted to like strip mine their planet, like say an Avatar or something, then that would make more sense. Like, they're just up pulling up trees and
so if we
you
were to
know,
look
like,
at it economically, when at the end when they're fighting Darth Maul in that chambery place, that appears to be some kind of plasma mine taking plasma out of the planet's core. And so I'm going to guess that their export is whatever the hell that is. That's just a random thought by me and probably from my head canon. But what
look at
else?
that. This right
Yeah,
here.
yeah, exactly. Thank you.
You
You're
like
the
that?
best. I'm so glad you come every day.
And I'm still between two beams. You like that?
Right? That's because you're an artist.
Yeah.
But
'Cause my composition is strong.
Right. Yeah. No, so like I have to imagine that at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, are the people suffering? Well, the people end up suffering because they're put into camps. But even then, like you kind of see them out of a window, I think,
Right.
down the street. And like one or two shots showing the people of Naboo being rounded up and some children crying would have literally of changed the whole thing. But I also think that that was maybe the first Star Wars movie where Lucas was trying to give the most adult political themes while at the same time trying to make the most kid friendly movie of them all. I think that was one of the first times he envisioned having his audience grow up with the story itself. I think he was thinking more in those terms. I think he was writing for his son at the time. And his son came up with a lot of the Jar Jar lines because it was just stuff that he said. He was so focused on his kids at the time. That's who he had in mind. I think you can make a good argument too, and I think this is actually a very political choice, is I would say, and I've argued in the past, that Padme is the protagonist of The Phantom Menace. Also, it's a problem, I think, for the trilogy because then you just switch protagonist in the second movie and she gets thrown away in the third one. So it's kind of like, well, what are you trying to do, Mr. Messy Writer? But Padme is the protagonist. She's the one with the problem. She's the one who doesn't think she can do anything. She's the one who gets off her hands. She's the one who moves to action. She's the one who executes the plan or comes up with the plan and then executes it. And
Yeah, and they only really find Anakin because she goes to town with him, right? And he's got a
yep.
crush on her and stuff. Like,
Yeah, well, yeah. If Natalie Portman comes to your town, you're going to come up with some lame ass lines like "Are you an angel?" You're going to do your best. You're going to start using your Will Smith pickup lines if it's all you got.
look, it's kind of like, people like to harp on that line, Ray is nobody. I don't much like
Yeah.
hearing it because people keep saying it over and over again.
Mhm.
And I keep thinking, like, if the internet today was today in 99 the way it is today,
Mhm.
and that "Are you an angel" thing I gotta imagine that had to be one of those ones you'd never not hear the end of,
I
like, "Are
don't
you an
know.
angel?
I
The
think
wings
if
of Iago,"
I think it depends on who says it. I think if
The
Adam
wings.
Driver comes up with the shirt off and says it to them, to the right demographic, oh, it's
What if Anakin had taken his shirt off,
yeah, right.
He's like that remember that ripped kid? There was that steroid kid like a while back who just had all those
Oh,
muscles.
yeah, they called him like Baby Hercules or something.
Yeah.
He had like a name like that. Yeah,
I'm
that kid was
Anakin.
hilarious.
Yeah, now you have I'm a person, not a slave.
Yeah. Yeah, swole 8-year-old Anakin, as they would say
Swole
today.
Walker, right?
Swole Walker.
Swole Walker.
Yeah.
I know. Just making
Yeah.
myself laugh.
Yeah, I always feel like in terms of politics, and honestly, I don't think this is going to be a dig at the right. Like I said, I'm just being up front. I'm pretty far left, but I don't think this is a dig at the right, and I think it's just as big of a dig at the left if it is a dig at all. The lessons in Star Wars at the same time don't give a shit where you're at on the political spectrum. They are very much black and white, right and wrong. And so if you find yourself defending a political policy or philosophy that is fundamentally against what dummy Luke Skywalker is telling you, then you might be falling down a rabbit hole that is not where you want to be as a moral human. Because no matter how you feel about Star Wars, no matter how politically dumb it can be, giving poison juice boxes to kids is bad. Do the rich profit off of the poor and the middle class if it even exists? Yes, they do. And so basically, as long as people, whatever they're at on the political spectrum, as long as that they are believing that if those fundamental truths are not true, then they can be taken advantage of and they will not prosper as much. And so I think that's what George Lucas was trying to get at. Because I do think in a lot of ways, he is way more conservative than your standard Twitter leftist. By far, I would say he's more conservative, easily. I think if he was on Twitter for 2 weeks, he would get canceled just for some basic nothing belief that he has. At the same time, I think that there is pretty much a very black and white, like, this is Star Wars is anti-fascist. And so that goes without saying. Like, it cannot be more bold in how it deals with stormtroopers. And
literally the name of the Nazi.
Yeah, literally, like pulling on it. So if anything, I would say Star Wars, if it had a political philosophy, it would be anti-fascist. Does that make it Antifa? I don't know, because I feel like Antifa is just a straw man, because I want to go to the meetings, but I don't know where they're at, because I've never met one.
They're at the Killicon. Didn't you ever see Ask a Ninja? Right?
Killicon.
The Killicon. It's where all the ninjas. We don't know where it is. We don't talk about it. You just have to stumble into the Killicon. Like, Ask a Ninja was my favorite thing on YouTube when it first started, and he goes off on.
I never saw it, but it sounds like I need to get caught up on something I missed.
Watch. It's from 2006 or 7. Ask a Ninja Killicon.
Okay.
It's just gold. Like, it's pure gold. Yeah, I was thinking about we had theorized about the Skywalker thing yesterday, and I had mentioned, interesting idea would be that the Skywalkers Rey had formed the Skywalkers, and they were Ronin Jedi, right?
Mm-hmm.
That had no order. And if you could go, and I was like, if he could go back and rewrite it, what if Finn had met Mace Windu or something like that, or read the Book of Wills and became an
Wait, are you suggesting two black people talk to each other on screen in a Star Wars movie?
I know, right? Well,
I mean,
break
I guess no, and that was I think maybe the only good thing about the inclusion of Janna in episode 9 was that happens, but after that it was like, that's all you did with it. sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you and
totally.
sidetrack.
But the thought I had in my head is, what if he had gone down the path of the Jedi Order, and then he's like, I'm gonna rebuild the Jedi Order with the temples, and she's like, I don't believe it. So their friendship could have rifted differently at the end of 9. Like each goes off to do something different, and they're not against one another, but they're not for the exact same thing. Like
Right.
Because Luke clearly doesn't take the path of the I just never saw Luke taking the path of the Jedi, like that's what led to all this in the first place. And he kind of doesn't anyway, regardless. When we don't know what happened ultimately. I mean, he made a temple. Obviously it went bad, but we don't know what he taught there. He could have been like,
Yeah, we don't know if he was straight up old school Jedi Council politics and ideology. Could you get married? We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. Obviously, he couldn't have been against it if his own sister was married, right? Like,
but she
and he was training her though, right?
He was, but at the same time, I kind of give that one a weird pass because they were already probably knocking boots when he was like, I need you to do this. And she's like, okay, but I'm hooking up with Harrison Ford and nothing's going to stop that now. Nothing.
She put on Queen,
Don't stop me now. Yeah. I mean, and so but you do have a good point at where they may have been coming from on it. At the same time, if Luke was debating that philosophical point, hey little punk, that philosophical point when his sister does start having premonitions about her unborn child is going to shit. Did that end up in the movie? See, that was the thing, is originally episode 9 opened on that. It opened up on them. The original edit of the film started with it panning down, and you think it's present day, 2 people with helmets on training with lightsabers, and you don't know who they are, and then it's revealed to be Luke and Leia, and then she has the premonition that Kylo or Ben is going to become. No, you can't do that, little punk. Sorry, my kid's trying to get on camera. Ends up coming, and she has a premonition, and then now it's off the table. She doesn't want to. She sees that if she continues on the path, it's going to end up bringing the downfall of everything, and Darth Vader Part 2. So kind of like that better, honestly. But they changed it around. I think it didn't look as good as they wanted it to. This is conjecture on my part, because my sources could not figure out why the fuck they were doing that at all. Like, why are they taking this out? Why are they moving this around? Like, what's going on?
Weird. It's not even a montage across the galaxy. It's very that scene of Kylo, like, supposed to be on Mustafar. It doesn't look like Mustafar, right? Like it. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get into it now, but like the original opening to Revenge of the Sith was supposed to be the different battles of the Clone Wars across the galaxy, and then they end up on Coruscant, and that's when the story kicks in.
Yeah.
And I was like, almost felt like that would have been the thing to see, something to tie the end of the movie to the front of the movie.
Yeah.
But that
kind of bookend it.
Yeah, that montage looks like kind of like, when you get those generic style guide photoshops, like it's just like a character over a tinted background, like, and the tinting feels photoshoppy. It doesn't feel cinematic. There's something, I don't know the word for it. Like almost it almost feels like it was put together like at the last second, which it probably was, but
yeah.
Yeah,
but
I'm not trying to take a dump on the film, by the way. You know what I mean? I'm not.
No,
to, like,
I mean we're discussing films that are really old now, so it's like, what else are we gonna do?
Right.
But no. But what does that say to Luke? Like, does Luke leave that meeting, that disappointment of his sister not continuing her training and not going on the path with him, and going away, does that end up changing things into, okay,
Well,
this isn't, we should go back to what the original Jedi had it right.
I also think too the only thing I've read, I haven't read many of these new books, for a lot of reasons, but
They suck a
when
lot of times.
no, it's like this, man. Like when they canceled the Legends, they didn't cancel the Legend. They canceled the Legend series. You know, no, when they were just like, hey, we're doing our own thing that's in canon. I just always thought it was a bad idea because those books were never in canon to begin with, but they had their own canon. Do you know what I mean? The EU had its own canon that weren't the movie canon. The movie would pull things in and out. But when they were like, we're scrapping all of it, then I'm like, oh, now you're going to reintroduce storylines, but they're not going to be as good. I'd rather the movies take bits than the new books take bits from. And I got to reread old storylines rearranged in a way that I just don't feel like remember. Does that mean I don't want to memorize this new thing, you know? Like, so whatever. I just took a break. But I heard Claudia Gray wrote Lost Stars, which I haven't read yet. I'll get to it. But I did read Bloodlines.
Mm-hmm. I love that one. That's one of the ones I actually really love.
And the thing she added, where she hid that she was Darth Vader's daughter, and it becomes revealed, which is why isn't Leia running the galaxy? The idea that she's related to Vader, and they like, Vader was never held responsible. Vader wasn't brought in front of the Hague or Twitter to be condemned for what he did, right? Like, so they held it on her head, you know, and like that to me is that should have been in the episode 7, right? Like that is a very logical thing that really just drags the it takes, I mean, that really builds off what happened at the end of the original trilogy.
Yeah, it almost like in a way, had they opened episode 7 with Kylo's this thing, the Senate is debating what the fuck is this, and then it comes out that she's Vader's daughter, and it's been a secret the whole time, and then that totally disempowers like everything that she has, that she's in control of, and then you see the First Order sort of rise out of that and be able to do its stuff. It was all there. They were clearly talking about it because it ended up in those books. You know what I mean? So it was clearly like on the table and discussed. And like I said, the name of the game was ambiguity. Don't say too much and don't put politics in it because it'll make everybody bored. Like that they just don't know how, they just didn't want to touch on it, you know.
I don't think anyone was bored watching the prequels. I mean, I was 19, 20. I mean, I was, you know, yeah, I was a diehard Lucas fan, but I was also like, I don't know about that. But bored was not a word for bored was going to the Dungeons and Dragons movie. You know what I mean? Bored was like Battlefield Earth, you know? Like, yeah. I tried to be like, hey, God, it's got to be funny, right? No. Like, bored is the spirit. I was like, there's no way a movie with Sam Jackson, Scarlett Johansson can't possibly be interesting. What is this? Like I fell asleep, man. So bored is not the prequels. They're just not, you know, when you envision something for 30 years, it just wasn't what you wanted in some way. But I look back now and I just think like at expanding the galaxy wasn't a bad thing. It was just not rooting it in character, you know, based protagonists. And I feel like the sequel trilogy is the complete opposite. It's rooted in character based protagonists, but has almost no galactic. You don't know where anything is geographically speaking, you know, like where are we? What is going on? What are we fighting for? Who is what? What is the, like, you know, what is Exegol in relationship to the edge of the galaxy? We ever talked about the edge? Was that a thing? Like, I don't, you know, like, why are we using Goonies coins to find the Death Star? Like, I don't know, you know,
that was what I put in my, I broke that piece, that like scoop about that thing. And I was like, it looks just like the Goonies, man.
Right.
And it really did. I was glad because when I saw the picture of it, I was like, oh shit, that is the Goonies. What I will say, to go back to like where we kind of started with what you were saying, was with politics and Star Wars, like, and it being boring or whatever. Like the problem is that like the opening crawl of The Phantom Menace literally writes words like taxation of trade routes. And there's people who will just see that and then there's like, that's boring. And it becomes critical fodder. When in reality, I think that it like it was supposed to be such a quiet opening. Like that movie is the most quiet opening of a Star Wars. It's like it's peacetime, and then here we go. Like, and so writing that opening crawl, I think, was probably, in my opinion, the most challenging of all of them, because you
what's
want to
ironic about that?
contextualize. Yeah,
What's ironic about that crawl is they go, oh, well, taxations is not the reason why Star Wars would start. And I'm like, just have Joe Rogan read it, because they're all leaving California because of taxes,
yeah,
like that
yeah.
actually is a giant. Guys, the T tax is the whole reason why this country sort of exists. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't even, like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah, taxation without representation, not just, and it's not just in that classic sense, like just taxes. Like, even though a lot of people today, it is just simply about taxes. Just like, it's kind of like a pseudo libertarian kind of like feeling or vibe that they have. Like, I should only pay for what I use, kind of thing. But it's like, yeah, for them it was taxation without representation, and like they like literally get into that in there, where it's like the representatives are not representing the people anymore. Padme literally has to get up off her ass because their rep is Darth Sidious, which is not going to work out good
I
for
know,
you.
which is like, how'd that happen? To think about the Leia's Vader thing though, I think the way to handle that would have just been in the opening crawl for episode 9. Would have been like, it's come out, and since it happened, since people found out that that Leia is Vader's daughter, which
Yeah.
means Luke Skywalker was Vader's son. 1 second.
Uh-oh.
Sorry.
He gets all choked up whenever he talks about family in Star Wars.
When Jabba starts swallowing frogs, I had a feeling for,
Yeah.
So they would not have trusted the Jedi Order or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that led to chaos, and then the First Order arrives, to take advantage of it. Like, maybe they're the ones who leaked the info. You know what I mean? Like, kind of thing. Like, there would have been something there that would have set this whole backdrop. Galaxy-wide kind of thing that would have paralleled some of the more broader scope aspects of the prequels, which I think were actually good. I think expanding the galaxy in the prequels was actually a good thing, because what context would you have for half the stuff that happens in The Mandalorian? I'm talking about all the people that didn't bother to watch the cartoons, right? The Clone Wars series and stuff. I haven't seen most of it, even though I worked on the t-shirts, because come to find out, by the way, on t-shirts, they don't want specifics on episodes on t-shirts.
What you mean? They don't want a Night Sister with a night bow from season 3, episode 16 or what?
And when you put that, you just get these like, what is this from? It's from episode, and then you just sound like, you just say it in the nerd voice from The Simpsons on episode 16. You're just like, oh gosh, Rob's a nerd. You're like, all right, just put challenge accepted on the shirt, Rob. Like, okay,
Right.
We have to sell 100,000 shirts, not the 1,000 the 500 shirts that you sell on these sites, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Such is the way. But I think like you wouldn't have a context for all these planets. I gotta wonder if the prequels had never done that, if you just gone from episodes 4, 5, and 6 to the Mando, right? That the average Star Wars audience, the general public, would go, there are other planets? Like, how many planets are there? I thought it was just a few, like, where's this larger stuff?
Yeah. No, and no, sometimes we forget about that kind of, about the growing pains of the prequel trilogy, about like what it did bring in that way, and how it did introduce like the idea that the galaxy is tore up, but space Italy still does exist. Space Rome is still there. Like, it's just not a politically nice place to be right now.
Space Istanbul used to be Space Constantinople. I don't know if you
yes. So yeah, I mean I'm with you there. So okay, let's stop ignoring the chat for a minute, because I feel like we're gonna get underwater with it if we don't. Star Wars is well known for characters that are just victims or plot points, fodder, so the villains can be villains and the heroes can shine. I think that, I don't think you're wrong there, but I think that the subtext is still there. I think that like in that very black and white kind of way, it still exists. Because when you get down to it, your political mindset is probably going to inform what a hero and what a villain is, or what the characteristics of a villain or a hero is when you're writing a senator, when you're writing somebody who is trying to corrupt a republic. Like, you have to really have certain beliefs about what leads to those specific things. And on the economist side of things, I think in academia, it's all very left until you get to economics. I think when it comes to economics, that's when you have more of an open season on the political spectrum. And when it comes to Lucas, though, it's like just so obvious where he leans. He's like anti-studio, he's anti all that stuff, and then he's embarrassed by the fact that he became the studio, that he became that guy.
Someone has to make these movies. I have to fund them somehow. Pepsi, like.
Yeah, right.
Do you think he would have took that kind of merchandise deal in the 70s to increase the budget for episode 4?
Yeah, I think in certain ways, like, Devo hadn't written Freedom of Choice yet. So it was like, you know what I mean? Like they were that generation was still kind of coming to terms with what has all of this amounted to, Coke or Pepsi. I mean, and I don't think George Lucas is a hypocrite. I think in terms of what he did, I think he almost did the best job you can do in the position that he was in, and with maintaining what he had. So I'm not knocking it, but did he take a shit ton of money from Pepsi? Yes. Did it make a whole generation of us about 20 pounds heavier that year, fatter, buying Pepsi products and drinking tons of it? Yes. So, it is kind of weird. Or you can make that the guy who wrote the story about the juice making the kids sick. It's like, well, you kind of played into that. I mean, and I think it's a fair criticism, but I don't think it's necessarily like what he meant to do.
Well, I was stationed in Germany when it came out, so I didn't get a lot of that marketing blitz. Just a few of I noticed the Pepsi cans at the PX, but at that July of '99, I flew back for my buddy's wedding for a week. And that's when I saw just the tail end of it. I went to my friend's house, and every time they ordered takeout or KFC or pizza, they got an extra box that wasn't soiled with grease and cheese. And I just remember looking at the KFC bucket, and I'm like, they put Gungans on the KFC bucket? Like,
yeah.
Are they saying they taste like chicken? Like, I mean,
I gained 5 pounds eating 5 boxes of fucking Fruit Loops to get a Han Solo with his helmet that came off. Like,
I would have tore through a lot of extra crispy chicken. I know I would have. I know
oh, yeah.
me.
Right.
Had Popeyes gotten that license? Oh my god.
Oh shit. Church's chicken. Oh man, I got diabetes. I'm dying.
It's symbiotic, the diabetes. Well, George is diabetic, so he was just teaching you about symbiosis.
He's all, if I'm going to be diabetic, everybody's going to be diabetic.
Unlimited sugar, right?
High fructose corn syrup for everyone.
Yeah, that's when Yum would have cracked down on this. We can't be getting political with Star Wars.
Yeah. Swift Spire says he hates the rule of 2. On one hand, it's like, on one hand, I see where it definitely turns off certain story potential and certain things. On the other hand, it does kind of make sense just when you look at basic gatekeepers on the internet, just basic gatekeeping online. If they have their way, it comes down to like 2. And in most ways, like in terms of Sith philosophy, economically and philosophically, it makes complete sense. At the same time, I get where people are like, but when I see like 15 red sabers on screen, man, they're all running to each other in the Old Republic trailer, I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, if that's your jam, I could totally get like why it doesn't work. You know what I mean? Like why it sucks for you.
I agree with all that. I would also say, yeah, that happened. And they learned from it. And they said, we came up with these rules because we're all just going to kill one another for power. And here's the end result. And that's to where like Anakin, in a world where Anakin wasn't 8 in the first film and he was like 16, like maybe like a James Dean kind of like rebel guy, right? the second film, he would have learned more of that from Palpatine on some level. Like Palpatine would have been telling him about these stories, and
Mm-hmm.
delving into it, why there only is, and maybe it makes Anakin feel more special when he, I don't need an apprentice, I need you. You're my second. You know what I mean? Like there can only be
Yeah.
two, and kill that guy, kill Dooku, and you know what I mean, and screw this guy. You are truly special. We don't need anyone else. Like I think it makes him feel more powerful too when you're told there could only be two of us and this guy's out and you're in. Oh my god, I'm in. It's almost like one day you'll offer someone else to come on the show and then you'll both kill me. And
Oh,
there can
Ben,
only
Ben, I haven't talked to Ben in a couple of days. He's probably going to want to come on pretty soon. So yeah, I'll let
Yeah.
you guys. No, but that's kind of like too. Like Lucas even started breaking his own rules. Asajj Ventress, outside of the films, obviously, but Asajj Ventress and General Grievous, while Grievous doesn't use the Force, there's all these like little baby exceptions to still make that happen.
Well, Grievous is active while Dooku's still alive too.
Yeah, and he doesn't use the Force, so he was never going to become a Sith Lord because he's all robot man.
Right.
He's an android. So you end up with like Lucas is finding these ways to get around it. But I also think that in terms of what they will tell and what they can do, there will always be ways of still making that happen where it's like, yeah, okay, we're gonna let these Inquisitors come up now. Like after Lucas leaves, they bring the Inquisitors into the forefront, which we're going to see in Kenobi, obviously. And you put all that together, like what do you have? You have essentially weak ass Sith Lords. They're like low rent Sith Lords that don't take away from the power of Darth Vader. They don't outshine him or be a generic or even cooler version of him.
They're Amazon basic Sith Lords.
They are the Amazon basic horde, yeah. And like you order the red cable, but they still send you the black one. Anyways, yeah, it's gonna end up where you're able to still have your cake and eat it too, I think, on that front. On the other hand, though, the idea of the Sith is probably going to be exclusive beyond episode 9 to the Skywalker saga and then stuff before. So I think that you end up with, who's to say that a new dark side cult doesn't come up. And when they do, their way of using lightsabers and stuff like that it'll just be the same thing under a different name, and maybe that will allow for that kind of story. Because they're gonna have to do something to allow the mystical side of Star Wars to prosper after 9. And just starting a Jedi Order, that could be where they take it. It could be about the struggle to make Rey's Jedi Order and to bring it back to what it was and how that's different. And when they do that, I have a feeling that's what maybe the High Republic could be setting up too, is like, why aren't they doing it in this way? How was it that worked for them? And then how's it going to be for Rey? But when it goes that way, it still can't work. If it works, there's no story to tell. And to bring this all back to politics, like when Poe Dameron becomes the general of the Republic or whatever, when you watch stories from people who enter the military a lot of times, and I don't mean this as like a blanket statement, but when people see more of the world, like in Americans anyway, see more of the world, they tend to get more conservative. People will enter like the CIA very left, and after they see more of the world and what it is, they go more right, on the political spectrum oftentimes. So it could be interesting, and I'm not saying I want a right-wing Poe Dameron. I'm not necessarily saying that, but
starts wearing Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah.
All right.
Rush Squadron and stuff. No. But
they got a new character, Captain Limbaum.
Yeah. Captain Limbaum. I'm a Kamal Calamari.
Ladies and gentlemen.
No, but it could. One of the things I will say about a very leftist writing team is that the people don't always have a lot to like talk about, and it may actually benefit for if Star Wars is to be a model for our best selves and our worst selves. Well, can you can't just assume people need to lose all of their conservative values. I would be all for it, but at the same time, I don't think that is right. I think that would be very fascist of me to go, no, there's only one way, and it definitely is very leftist. So if Star Wars has a social and political responsibility, maybe Star Wars needs to figure out how to show conservatives how to be good conservatives.
I
You know what
also
I'm
think too
saying?
it's a limitation, not a limitation, but it's a weak it's a weak spot in the Death Star of storytelling in Hollywood, where because they know they have your attention, they're telling you things.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas say like in games, in game development with Jedi Fallen Order, or the canceled Ragtag, where it's a case where gameplay is first and then storytelling second. So they try to find many ways to create or craft a story that interacts or engages interaction with the audience,
Right.
right? And so you can end up Fallen Order that has all these backdrops of political episode 3 fallout, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's constantly like forcing you to engage with it in interactive ways versus just preaching blah 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 blah, like right in front of your face.
Right.
And I almost wonder if that kind of storytelling could be learned more from Hollywood at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes, you know, I think having, I mean, I know some screenwriters, and sometimes the thing that I glean from them is they feel like when they get something, they have to make certain that their voice is heard in some way. And
Right.
sometimes that voice is very preachy, right? For the lack of a better term, I don't have and sometimes it's very just, that's the narrator's voice. Like a Quentin Tarantino film is Quentin's voice. Like
Oh
you're
yeah.
never not hearing Quentin's voice,
When
right?
people are reading their lines, you could hear his voice because they're just like, he's making me imitate him.
Right. But you're generally hearing what the character thinks. You're not hearing what Quentin thinks. And I think
Sure.
that's the thing people get confused about. They go, "Well, this character said this. That means you say that." No, I didn't say it. The character said. That's what the character thinks. And I think sometimes writers can make every character
Good
have
point.
their viewpoint.
Yeah,
And
very
that's
good point.
it's a very difficult thing, to be. You have to. They don't teach that a cautionary tale in any form of creative writing. Like they don't go, "Be careful," But I find that that's something that I stumbled into that I constantly think about.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good, if not profound point. Because you will see that like a character says something and then people are like, I'm not watching this show anymore. This show believes this or is saying this. And yeah, it's like, no, they're not. You're right. And that is one of the things that like you don't actually see that in Star Wars at all. They all seem to have like the same exact moral compass or the same exact series of beliefs in more recent Star Wars. Like Poe, Rey, and Finn, they don't really they are always on the same page. And when it's not, it's like oh, bickering, because remember Empire Strikes Back when they bickered? Like it's kind of just like a throwback to that. It's like a stylized screwball comedy kind of throwback vibe at best. And I don't know if it's the right answer or anything like that. I'm more thinking kind of out loud on this because like what do you do if you are like if you have like very like conservative, let's just say, like values, and you like how do you contend in the world, how do you play in the world today where you have a lot of very leftist values where it's like anything goes, like almost like you almost have to take on a uh Obi-Wan Kenobi, you must do what you feel is right, of course, kind of perspective. And otherwise you are just going to be at war. You know what I mean? You're going to be like, and like I said, I'm not trying to represent anybody, so I'm not trying to put anything into anybody's mouth or anything like that. But it is probably a very kumbaya thing of me just be like, hey, everybody, just like live your best life. But that is where I'm coming at it from. But that's almost seems to be where, how do you come to that conclusion of if you believe in God and you believe God disagrees with this stuff. Well, how do you come to the conclusion that God needs to sort it out, not you? It's not up to you. God will deal with it. Like, and that is sort of like something that could be played with the Force. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
If somebody's
I think again, like, you really has to come down to who, like Quentin, to bring up Quentin Tarantino, because I was like, there's sort of two, and I'm really broadly painting this with the
yeah,
basic of strokes because we don't have 6 hours to get into it. There's two basic rule of thoughts where you conjure up a premise and an idea and a series of events, and then these characters go along a series of events. All right, that's like whiteboarding an idea, and then we'll have an ending and it'll blow up, and then maybe you reverse engineer the story backwards, or you have a premise and then it leads to, but generally you're following a series of scenes or ideas of scenes. And Quentin's process is more like he conjures up some characters and he has like a general idea of where they'll start, but then he just writes the characters and then they dictate where the story goes. And that's why sometimes at the end of his films it ends up in places that he would say, look, if I force them into a better ending, yeah, it would probably be a more satisfying ending, but that's not where the characters wanted me to go.
yeah.
And I think the way to avoid, oh, so if I'm conservative now, I'm going to tell a conservative story, I'm a liberal, I'm going to tell a liberal story, is to create characters who inhibit those values and allow the characters to dictate where they're going to go. And that,
And then in Star Wars, they would have to essentially show the best qualities of those in the end, like as heroes specifically.
and even if
That's what
one
you would
ends
hope
up
for.
being the antagonist, the best antagonists are ones where you go, they're not quite wrong. Maybe they're going about it in the wrong way. Like case in point, I know, like, I'm not sympathizing with Palpatine or anything, but like in Winter Soldier, Robert Redford's point of view in that movie is not an inaccurate statement to some extent. Just
Right.
the way they're going, like Nick Fury and Robert Redford have essentially the same goal, but the solution to that plan is Captain America's solution to that plan is very different, and we're not going to point guns at the whole world. You know what I mean? To solve this problem, like this is not the thing. So, like, and then you could, like, that's where, let the chips fall where they may, but let the characters, go where they need to go. That being said, there's just some things, like, if you're not going to care about others, and you live in a world where you're not going to be empathetic, I mean, then that's the choice you make. And if that makes you feel uncomfortable that no one agrees with you, then I can't help you with that. Like,
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You know what? You told me not to be empathetic, so why should I care?
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's a very difficult. And look, if you have two characters saying that, that would be something to put on screen because that's something that you can relate. You're telling me not to care, so why should I care what you think? But that's double speak. It's a conflicting decision,
Yeah, and having characters who have something to say to each other gives you dialogue, and it gives you scenes and
subtext.
Yeah, and that was the, I think, the best stuff in the sequel trilogy was Rey and Kylo going back and forth, and Kylo even, I think, makes compelling arguments about, like, letting all the past die. You know what I mean? And stuff like that. Like when he starts to go there, it was like, this is almost in a strange way is super liberal, in the sense that it's completely the most progressive thing ever said in Star Wars, but it's from a maniacal way. Like, and when you get down to politics, the way I always learned it was sort of like a circle, and you have right and you have left, and if fascism is 12 o'clock, both sides can actually flip around and get back to fascism.
The back end of the
I have
circle,
a little kid sneaking up on me right now.
Right.
So anyways, James Washington says Mando has been nominated for 24 Emmy nominations. So
and
that's cool.
That's season 2. All right, so they're all for Nick Nolte.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think that's, like, great. Like, on personally, so up front, I'm going to say, I love it when people are rewarded for their work or awarded for their work. So I'm totally all about it. As a mindless consumer, I don't give a shit. like it's like I don't need the validation of the Emmys to, like, tell me that Mando season 2 was cool. But
I just wish that awards like that would ensure further employment.
Yeah.
Like when they go, this visual effects team was up for an Oscar, but they shut the studio down. So it's
Right.
not like those awards guarantee that, well, I will keep going with this crew and we'll keep everyone, going and reward them for their efforts. It's like, at the end of the day, it's kind of like whoever signed the check and was the head of the studio at the time is the one who kind of reaps the reward, right? So it's
Yeah.
dope. I mean, it helps individuals um get their next gig, right? Like at the end
Right.
of the day, like it definitely goes.
And
If I put that little leaf symbol with the most annoying podcast, but it's in cursive and it says Rome and Cannes on it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I like I said, like it's like one of those things where like I'm like everybody who worked on the show and the crew and stuff are like good. I'm glad that they're being recognized for all of their good work and all their hard work and for taking Star Wars seriously and all that. At the same time, it's like we don't need the validation to know that what we love is rad, but I'm
I mean, how
also
many
an
times was
asshole.
Cheers nominated for an Emmy? I couldn't remember.
Yeah. It,
Like
it, it was just it was like a knee jerk thing, right? If I
yeah,
remember right.
right.
It was just
Yeah.
like, yeah, of
So
course.
all right. I mean, TV Guy would have an Emmys thing. I'd be the really thick TV guy that would show up,
Right.
and I'd be like, "Is it more Cheers and Jeers?" No, it's Emmys. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I forgot about
Newhart.
Cheers and Jeers. Yeah, it'd be like Cliff the mailman, blah blah blah, Jeers. And you're like, oh man, Cliff, you messed up this week. But Qui-Gon, oh, you always get me. Qui-Gon Jinn says, Boss Nass refers to them as the Naboo. I think he's more familiar with them than Watto. Huh, you're wrong. It's the Naboo. Just kidding. Sorry.
Maybe
That's-
Watto is just being space racist.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like,
Toydarians
you're gonna make racist allegations about my character? Well, I'm the racist one. Flip the old table on you there, media in 1999. No,
and a little bit of observation that gets you nowhere. Observation that goes nowhere.
yeah.
George, named an alien species Toydarian, right? That's on the nose. And then in episode 2, when the big flack was he named a planet Camino, it was like, you're being racist against the Hispanic and Latino community. He's like, I would never do that. The names aren't that meaningful. I'm like, you named it. But the movie before, it's a Toydarian.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to, like, I told you, it's an observation that goes nowhere, but it's like, did you name it after a car? And I don't think naming a car it has anything to do with the Latino. My mom owned a Camino, like white as can be. Like, it's so odd how they, like, if he had named, I always wanted to name, I wrote some Star Wars fan fiction once, I won't get into now, but like I named them the Mopar brothers. I'm like, that's Mopar brothers. It was a bunch of Ponda Bubba base bounty hunters, right?
Right.
And there was like 3 of them. Like, Mopar, why wasn't that ever?
When I was a kid, my dad dropped me off at my grandparents' house because he was going to buy a car, and I was watching the very problematic Dukes of Hazzard television show,
Right.
riding my Confederate flagged big wheel. Yeah, not the best thing to put on a kid's
That's the
toy.
one with the yellow and the orange.
Yeah, the little slide, the brakes so you could slide out.
I think I had that one.
Yep, that was the one I had too. And anyways, I'm watching it, and it's an episode with the tow truck driver, and I don't remember his name now. It's like Stu or something for all I know. But I had this idea. I'm like, my dad won't have to go to work anymore if he buys a tow truck. And then I can ride in the tow truck where Daisy Duke is sitting, and I'll jump out. I'll put the hook on the car, and we'll just tow truck around all the time. It'll be great. So we're like going to my grandparents' house. I'm like telling him this idea. He's just completely not listening to my 3 or 4 year old gibberish. And then he shows up and he's like, all right. He like covers my eyes and like, here's the new car. And he does it, and it's an El Camino. Like with the back and everything.
With the back.
Dude, I was so pissed because it almost I was like looking at, I'm like, how does the tow truck work? How does this a tow truck?
Can't do anything with El Camino.
Yeah.
I once had to ride in the back of those going from Palomar Mountain in the winter. All my mom wouldn't let me in the front with my brother because
Yeah.
my mom hated me. So she's like, just sit in the back. So I was just back
I sat in the back of that thing. Ours had like a cover that went on it,
there.
and it was like super hot. I'm like, I'm surprised I didn't die. Maybe my dad was trying to kill me. Maybe he was trying to get rid of me.
Just roll around back there.
Yeah. No, but when that planet was called Camino, I was like, ew, because I was just mad at the El Camino still for some reason.
Right.
I like 22 years old, and I'm like, I need to let that go.
Yeah, here's the Mazda system, you know.
Swift
I mean,
Spire says, "Oh, sorry, go on."
oh, go ahead.
No, Swift Spire says the movies don't go that far in depth. I don't know, man. I don't know. I
No,
think
George even says, and I don't have the quote here, but George, and I'll get it later. But George even says, "It's there. You may not see it at first, but if you look for it, it's there. They're there."
yeah,
You know, he did. I do give George a lot of credit for like, how do you put a bunch of, again, this is the conversation. How do you put a bunch of stuff that is, you know, political or topical or biological, and then also wrap it up in like a movie about spaceships, you know?
right.
And I think, go ahead.
No, yeah. If people really usually buy into the mythology hook, line, and sinker idea, the Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell models were used and stuff like that, and it's like, well, if you buy into that, you have to buy into the politics as well.
1,000%, you know, and politics that may have existed for thousands of years, like
Yeah.
not even current politics. Like, so this, I mean, if you ever read like the history of the Peloponnesian War, it was written as a series of speeches that may have occurred or not occurred in various senates, but it's told that way. The story's told that way.
Yeah.
And I read it around the time of the Phantom Menace because I wanted to know more about this type of political discourse, like the Senate, you know, where these sort of Senate speeches came from and how they led to war. And so that's what I read. And when you
Yeah.
read that, you realize like that's very much what's going on in episode 1. Like,
Yeah, well,
it's-
yeah, Lucas is going, and if you believe what he says, he was studying how republics have classically fallen and what happened to them, and then he's putting that in, and he found these commonalities, and then he hammered it home. And we can't pretend like we're better than the whole history of the world. You could be about American exceptionalism sometimes. Sometimes maybe it's not bad, but usually it is. And this is the one time where we don't get to, I don't think we get to pretend that we're better than every republic that has ever existed. Even if we are better than it, it doesn't mean that we're not prone to the same crumblings, the same structural failings and stuff like that they've all been prone to. Like a republic unto itself has these weaknesses that are attacked, and here's how they're attacked. And it
yeah, I mean,
doesn't.
the thought that popped in my head was our dental work is better than it's ever been in the history of the world. But if anti-vaxxers start doing their own dental work, it's going to go back a few thousand years.
Right.
Oh, I'll pull that tooth out myself. Like,
Yeah, no,
like,
it's
don't. Like,
it's no, you know, you're like totally right on that. It's about Lucas wanted to pass on these very, in his mind, very white and black lessons, and black or white lessons, kind of like evil good, here's what you should do, here's how you should be part of a society. Sith are all about themselves, Jedi are about selflessness.
you said black and white, and I was thinking Michael Jackson. I'm like, he was almost Jar Jar. Like, I wonder.
He was, yeah. Dude, I'll try to look it up and find it just to read on the show because it's funny to talk about Michael Jackson. And there's this like quote I've read from a magazine, and he's like, "Me and Blanket, we watched those movies, and they're just bad. They're just bad. They're just no good. No, those movies are stupid."
So bitter.
Yeah, he's so fucking pissed that he didn't get to be Jar Jar Binks.
How
Can you-
different though a movie would that have been with him as Jar Jar though? Like,
Right?
Seriously, right? That it would have been a completely different.
Oh my god, me's the people gonna die.
I mean, I don't even think he would have done that, right? Because like, the words were written Misa, so
Yeah,
some people recently have been taking it to like, well, Ahmed Best came, that's the voice that he spoke to with his children or his niece or whatever when he read her to sleep, and so George didn't write, a black person came over. I'm like, no, the words were written in the script, like that was going to be there, like.
No, he wrote them that way because his son spoke that way as a small child. That's what he says. And like a lot of the weird things that he says were things that his small son said before he could speak properly, and he was just noting it all.
All right.
Yeah.
Gibberish, right? Sort of.
Yeah, gibberish and stuff like that. I think even the name Jar Jar is something that his son was saying.
Yeah, the name Jar Jar definitely came from Jet. I remember him saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I don't know if it were you passing the buck to your kid, George. Like, I don't know how to tell you this
right.
It's not my fault. It's the kids. Like,
whatever political thing I said stupid today, it was my kid who just showed up right now. That was her. That was her fault.
Here, let me just hang him out the window and show you. It's the Jet. Like,
no, but I mean, I will say like, I don't like. I think where subtlety and where the heart is does matter. So do I think George Lucas was trying to propagate minstrel shows and blackface and resell it to a whole new generation? I really don't in my heart believe that's what George Lucas was doing. Was it maybe foolhardy of Lucas to not consider exactly that part of America's past and to not have said, is this a good depiction? Is there a negative side to doing this? What am I reigniting with my, but at the same time, I can't make any connection to a blackface revival and Gungans. I can't do it.
Well,
if
you know
it
who
was
recently
there,
experienced that argument was it Jay-Z who did the Sambo and the animated music video that used a lot of the art styles from the 30s, which are, obviously, he's using that in a way to comment on this stuff. But even like the idea at the time was, you're going to make this popular with kids. Right. They're not going to get the subtext. They're not going to understand what you're saying, like they're just going to think it's a cool art style. And we're going to have to deal with this all over again type of thing. So it's complicated stuff. I think the thing to take away with the prequels, and I've said, this is something I don't think has ever gone away, and we can all agree, is George needed to work with some writers, but George doesn't like when people change what he writes.
Yeah.
So like that wasn't going to happen. Like no matter, even if he brought Frank Darabont and M. Night Shyamalan to come in there and give notes and write stuff, it wouldn't have mattered.
Darabont and Fisher.
Right,
gave
Fisher,
him notes.
Yeah. Gave him notes, but I just don't, and they're changing it's my thing. And like, when you get to that Lucas biography and how strong that 60s director's vision was, I mean, like you and I are from, like, we spent our teenage years in the 90s, and you talk about grunge music a lot. Like if you weren't a teenager in the 90s, I was into grunge music and I didn't like any music with lyrics. Like I only listened to musical scores as a kid. Queen was the only band I liked.
Did we just become best friends? No, I'm just kidding.
Right, it's true. But it's the first song I ever remember hearing on the radio. Another One Bites the Dust. Like I remember where it was. Like I don't know why, it just resonated with me.
Yeah.
But I was annoyed by We Are the World, and like I like the Goonies Cyndi Lauper theme until she started singing. And nothing against Cyndi Lauper, beautiful. True Colors is amazing, but like I didn't appreciate lyrics until I heard Stone Temple Pilot, Temple of the Dog, Nirvana, like for whatever reason. So that strongly resonated with us. And I have a strong independent, like the independent movement in comics, the creator-owned comics movement of, create your own thing. If it does well, you should reap the reward. Why did the companies always, like, that is what Lucas sort of went through in the 60s, but in film. And I just don't think he ever lost a bit of that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I believe that, number one, I believe in that stuff 100%. I think corporate nerd stuff sucks. I think corporate rock and roll sucks. I think corporate rap sucks. I think everything becomes a compromise at that point. So I'm completely all in on the independent side of things.
Why we devote an entire podcast to a corporate controlled,
right? But
IP,
even,
right?
but I would even
conflicting nature. It's this one and that one.
but no, and not to kiss our own butts or anything like that. But at the same time, we aren't necessarily toting their line. We're decoding their stuff on our own terms and then dealing with it. And that is one of the things in politics, to kind of keep it brought back in here, is that when you are a writer, whether it's a song or a movie or a play, whatever, you're encoding a specific message, and then the audience is going to decode that on whatever terms they do. And that's what is completely fascinating about like people who do go like, there is no politics in Star Wars.
Or when they say, I don't want messages in my stuff. And then when you get things that don't have messages, you go, that was generic. I didn't care.
Right.
Like you got to understand, like in illustration, or in, I'm not a construction guy, but I understand a foundation. And in illustration, there's structure and form and construction. And if you don't have construction in your art, things end up flat. Then they get flatter and flatter. And then you end up with the stuff that goes, well, that just looks generic. You ever hear the term generic? And that's because there's no color theory involved. There's no perspective or construction involved. Not to say everything has to have three-dimensionality, but if you're not the less, it's like the story circle, the Dan Harmon story circle. The less of those little items on the circle you have, the less of a story you have. You can do 2. It's just not as full of stories if you had 4. Right. And so like, it's not like you need to hit every one, but the less of those things you have, the less of a story you have, which is why they're able to tell so many great Rick and Mortys in the amount of time they have. I mean, that's what I think about, like, creatively speaking, how many great episodes of that show they pumped out, you know, like, not that story circle is the way forward for everybody, but I think it's a great check and balance for getting things done. Otherwise I mean, could you imagine George trying to write an episode? He took 3 years to write one, you know, right?
Yeah.
Episode 1, right? Like a whole season of Rick and Morty, even with 7 people, that's a lot of work. Like, it's a tremendous amount of work.
No, and Rick and Morty is just so efficient. That is always what I was like. Yeah, these obviously Harmon and that crew know structure like out the butt. Excuse me, do I know you? Swissbar, can show needing backup of midics. I feel like it kills the idea of the 4. Oh, like midichlorians. Yeah, that's like I said, just back to the symbiosis thing. What did I skipped Kane's comment on accident? The Rise of Skywalker novelization retconned the rule of 2 to mean 2 Sith that rule others. And I mean,
that those novelizations, like, I mean, when you read those novelizations, and I have, they constantly conflict anything. That, I mean, they're like again, Rey and Poe meeting and then acting like they never met because they met in the novelization, you know?
Yeah.
Like, so
it may say something about where Lucasfilm's head is at for the foreseeable future on that idea, though, for what it's worth. I mean, there could be insight to that. It could be an oversight or prophecy.
Well, I think the best novelization was for The Phantom Menace. I mean, I'm not over here preaching The Phantom Menace like it's the greatest movie ever, but I read the book before I saw the movie.
Same. Me and Randy read it at Celebration in a hotel room. We were like, people like, hey, you guys want to come out and party? And we had the black leather-bound Phantom Menace novel with Maul's red face on it. It was signed by Terry Brooks too. I wish I still had it. But we were like,
excellently written too. Like,
it was well done. Like, and I liked the stuff that wasn't in the movie in that one too. Like Anakin saving a Tusken Raider was a little and he saved, and it's like so good when you get into Attack of the Clones. Like,
and it opens up with him pod racing, and that when he talks about Waldo, not like last time I broke my pod. You see that in the beginning of the film before you go to Naboo and stuff. So
yeah. I actually feel like reading that again pretty soon. Can show needing backup. Okay, yeah, we already read that one. Let me see. Sorry, I don't want to skip over it. Oh wait. He says that so Spider says Padme was just a toss-out character. She has the kids and they axed her. Yeah, see, like that's the thing, is like that's where I am the second or maybe the first most critical on the Phantom Menace trilogy, the prequel trilogy, is that she's the protagonist, then she's just the love interest, and then she's just carrying the babies. And I always wondered, like I said, like I heard like a lot of things about her from actors on the film too, that she at the time was just a pain in the ass, like wasn't handling Tunisia well on Attack of the Clones, which I could completely understand. I would be terrible. I would not. I couldn't imagine being out there in 100+ degree weather and being like, space lasers, give me a hug. Like I could see how she might be terrible, but at the same time, I could. I've always wondered if that had anything to do with that kind of thing. But there was also a big shift up in the focus of Revenge of the Sith. There was like a big like rewrite that happened on the sort of the back end. The Rinsler making of book. I think that's the first Rinsler making of book, and you can tell that's one of the ones that feels the most compromised by him. I feel like Rinsler is pretty uncompromising in his making of books for the most part. He gets to what was going on, what was everybody saying, and it's in there, and that's what I respect about his original trilogy books the most. But on his Revenge of the Sith one, that's the one that was still the most kind of a tie-in to the film, and didn't stand on its own as much. But a lot of shifting happened in that movie, and they end up throwing out and cutting the scenes with Padme and Bail forming the Rebel Alliance, the pact to go forward right there. And then we see where it kind of ends up going to some degree in the more recent stuff. That doesn't seem like that scene happened. Is that scene canon or not? Or maybe it is canon. Maybe it just wasn't that strong, or it was just really hard to get other people, like other groups, like in line. Because by the time we get to Rogue One, there is that like council, but they're not all on the same page. They're not really working together, and it's not really it's not happening yet. Saw Gerrera's gone his own way. Shit did not pan out up until 20 years later.
Well, I'm reminded of the Gary Kurtz interview he did with IGN. I want to say 2000, 2001, around there.
Igen?
And, huh?
Igen. I'm
Igen.
sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
Igen.
just reading.
Yeah,
I'm just
Igen.
reading.
Okay, I was
sorry.
like,
I'm being an idiot.
Igen.
Sorry.
Yes, Igen. No. Well, they used to be N64.com. They Imagine Games Network, and they turned to IGN. But he did an in-depth interview with them and spoke pretty candidly about the prequels and where he and George had planned the original trilogy initially.
Yeah.
And it was that, that the first trilogy was supposed to be about fathers, and the second would have been about mothers. So that, and originally Jedi Luke found out he had a sister, but that she was hidden on the other side of the galaxy. And Palpatine also
AKA Willow.
Which he said that mother story became Willow.
Yeah.
Like that he just scrapped it, wrapped it up, killed Palpatine, made Leia his sister because he was done with that. But that mother story became Willow.
Yeah.
So like, I always wonder, like, being that, and you're right, Willow was not a success. It just wasn't the success that people expected in the 80s. The name Star Wars, and
Cocoon, which is fallen off. Cocoon can't get arrested.
My wife, I brought up Wilford Brimley to my wife. She's like, who? I'm like, Cocoon. She's looking at me like, you sad old man. Like,
what? You're all what? Diabetes.
Come
on.
Like, yeah, like the thing when that tripped me out when I realized who that was, without the mustache.
Mm-hmm.
He has but like if he had reincorporated some of those ideas into the prequel trilogy with Padme, like would have been interesting to get more of the mother arc throughout the three films. If Anakin because Anakin's not like a guy in those films that you latch on and root for. I don't feel you're like, yeah, jump out that and laugh maniacally out the car thing. He's not the guy you're rooting for. So it's like Padme should have been the clear protagonist. Because I mean, a lot of people go, well, was it Obi-Wan? Obi-Wan's not the protagonist. I mean, and at the end of the film, he has no, other than he takes some babies away and hides them, he really doesn't win. Padme would be the one that way she can save the galaxy by having these kids and hiding them. Like, she really could have been the clear protagonist throughout those three films, and it would have been the mother arc as opposed to the son arc or a father story, like.
Yeah. And that's where, when we are in the current aftermath of the sequel trilogy, where you hear the most, they just didn't plan any of it out and blah, blah, blah. It's like, they never really have. It doesn't justify it, but things have always changed by the time you get there. Like you do have a plan. The plan just always changes because they're reacting to market demands, the audience, and all kinds of issues. And so you end up with two trilogies now that are not as perfect as the original one.
Each one leans a little on the other side, right? Like, it's weird.
It does. They both have these like imbalances, and in a weird way, the same problems. In
Yeah,
that
one
it
has more world building and story, ultimately a story, right?
Mhm,
With a beginning, a middle, and an end, with poor acting.
mhm.
Let's just be honest. And
Yeah,
then
yeah, for sure.
the sequel trilogy has phenomenal acting with parts of a story that don't ultimately connect at the end. You
Or
know,
or or
like
if we wanna be fair, we could say not even poor acting, it's poor directing. It's because, like, all of the poor actors are great actors in reality.
I'm not
Right.
blaming the actors.
Yeah,
Please,
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't. Like, I mean,
I'm just
how
trying
do
to
you
be
have a
nice to
movie
them.
like if I write down like when you look at the Phantom Menace, it looks like a wizard casting call of like the best actors. I got Liam Neeson, I got Sam Jackson, I got
Mhm.
Ewan McGregor from Trainspotting, I got the girl from the
Professional.
Leon the Professional, right? Like it
Mhm.
has this. It got General Zod. You know what I mean? I got General
Right.
Zod in the film. Like it reads like the who's who of casting. And then you watch the movie, like, what in the living hell? Like, how did
Right.
what? How is the best? I mean, even Anthony Daniels' voice work, because he was in 3PO in that film, is like, I mean, when you come down to it, the best acting in that film was probably Watto, and that's not the best caricature ever, you know? Like, in Jar Jar, I mean, you know, he's not acting, you know, like
Yeah.
delivering those lines, like he's doing, you know, Ahmed Best is doing pretty solid job given what he has to read.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and
No,
obviously
no, no,
Ian McDermott, you
and
know,
and the, Padme problem, if you wanna call it a Padme problem, where she's the protagonist, and then she slowly becomes nothing, kind of, by the end of it. You could almost make, in a weird way, not as bad, but Finn has this is the same kind of thing where when you watch Force Awakens, you feel like it's their story, and then by the end of it, you're like, oh no, this is Rey's story, and Finn has some real estate in it. That's kind of how it feels. He did not feel as they didn't really. I don't think they landed him all the way, and I think in the series, I think John Boyega's fucking great. And I think personally, Abrams have known this, may have been very real about this, and that may be why he got rid of the love idea of "I love you, Ray," and it may have been why he made him a Jedi, because in doing that, I feel like it gave him the biggest gift ever, and that's that if they want to have Jedi stories after Episode 9, they need Finn, they need John Boyega, and they have to pay him. That's what I think. That's what I hope. I hope it goes that way for him too, because I think he's great, and so I want to see him back, and I want to see them do interesting things with that character. Unlike Padme, unfortunately, who pretty much had to die. You know, I mean, the only other way that they could have done it, because Leia says she has impressions of her mom, and it's like she's, mostly sad. They could have had it where she couldn't stay. She couldn't, like, and there were some rumors that they were going to do that during the prequel era. That if they were going to have her leave Leia for her own, I mean, for her own protection, and that she was going to go off into obscurity, and then that's where
like
she would
maybe if
die.
she hit on the other side of the galaxy, so Vader would be looking for her and not looking for the kids.
Yeah. Yeah, she could have been like the red herring while they're chasing her down. Meanwhile, they're living on Tatooine, and and there was
Like
some talk.
communism.
Yeah, there
The
was
red
some
herring.
there was some talk of it going that way. Really, on a side note, just a quick detour. I wanted to mention it yesterday. I don't think I did. One of the high rumored things for Attack of the Clones that that wasn't real. I don't believe. I don't believe it had any truth to it whatsoever. But that I thought was interesting was that Bel Organa was supposed to marry Padme as the Queen of Naboo. This is before we knew she was just a senator. And then it was going to be their wedding at the end, but it was going to end up getting circumvented, and she was going to marry Anakin instead.
Which is
And
how Leia sort of was like a princess, right? Because he was
yeah,
royalty, and
and then that was going to explain how that ends up going into that way.
well,
But
there's no love triangle in that film, and it's sort of
no,
vaguely kind of implied that maybe Obi-Wan, you know, like you kind of
the
get the sense, you know,
did you
obviously,
ever have the Best Buy disc for Phantom Menace called? I think it was just like behind the scenes or something like that. And it was a bonus Best Buy disc, that CD-ROM you can get. I don't remember if you had to buy
yeah.
the
So
Phantom Menace
LucasArts at the
movie.
time, LucasArts did one originally for behind the scenes original trilogy, which had a lot of those cut scenes, like the
Yeah.
saber and stuff, and they did a second CD-ROM companion for the Phantom Menace. Yeah.
Yeah, and in there it had a bunch of script pages of the very first draft of the Phantom Menace, and in
The
it
beginning.
the beginning, yes, and it has like Padme checking out Kenobi. There's no Qui-Gon. She's like checking him out. Like, that dude is hot, like the guy in Train Spotting. And I am a girl in 1996, and I am all about this sickly heroin looking dude. And then young Anakin's there, and he's like, this guy is the shit. I want to be this guy when I grow up because Natalie Portman wants him. And so that was kind of like where the script was coming from at that point. And which did imply that there was going to be a love triangle. There was all kinds of rumors that the love triangle between Kenobi and that stuff was going to be a big central plot thing in the movie and everything like that. And I got a feeling Lucas decided that was a way of circumventing expectations. That's my guess.
I'm still, and I'll get into it. Like, I'll take some photos of some of the concept art for a later show, but like, I'm really interested to know, I would just know, why did he cut the opening of Revenge of the Sith from being the battle scenes across the planet, across the galaxy, like the Clone Wars, like sort of the way the Clone Wars show opens up with, and these things are happening around with, I don't want the
war
time on the March voice, right?
Wrong.
Literally
he's on a podcast right now. What's he gonna do?
Yeah. These dapper little aliens are getting their heinies kicked in the keisters,
my hunch is that you accidentally answered the question right there. Is that because he was going to do the Clone Wars cartoon?
But no.
And yeah,
there's no way he planned the Clone Wars cartoon when he was in 2002.
When he was doing Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith. No, you're right. So like 2003 or 4.
I had friends on Revenge of the Sith who went out to dinner he would take people out to dinner on the crew all the time.
Okay.
And he was taking people out on the crew, and he was talking about how he was going to do these TV shows, like essentially like, we're going to have you back. Don't worry. We're coming back. And I think we're going to come to Australia. Yeah. And
it's my MacGuffin.
But I honestly believe that's why he was okay with cutting Padme's sequences out of the movie, out of Revenge of the Sith, because he was going to deal with that same content later on when he got to the live action television show, when he got to Star Wars Underworld, which was going to be about how the criminal underworld economically and politically is funded by the Empire and then also leads to the tools of rebellion. And so there was no way that stuff wasn't going to come up in that show. So it does kind of make sense that
Ryan Church is pretty vocal in that book about, I was very unpleased about that decision.
Yeah.
I'll give Paul Duncan credit for, it's in the book. He's like, I was really, you wanted to say more, like, what the fuck? Like, you just, it had to probably be months of effort to like figure out the timing, the designs of the sequences, like to cut it all in and work it. And George's like, yeah, they're just going to save Palpatine and talk shit, like, what? Like, the thing I'm going to say, like, frustrated. So before Revenge of the Sith came out, the soundtrack was released, like, I want to say like 2 or 3 weeks before, right?
I remember when it leaked. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was out before. And that whole like militaristic version of the Jedi March is loud and bombastic. I was like, Williams did it again. Like, he made a military version of the Jedi theme, which should never exist, right? Like, you could just see like this, and then in the movie you can't hear it. It's so low in the mix. I was like, in the theater, I was like, what the fuck?
There's
hearing the sound effects.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. There's like 2 reasons for that, which you probably know, but maybe some people don't know. And that's that, number one, when they released those soundtracks, like, those soundtracks are re-recordings that are meant like they record it twice. They record it for the film and to the film, then mix it to the film, and then they also record the track as a composition outright, where timings are slightly more correct. Because like whenever they're doing a film, they have to like adjust timings to what's going on screen. Whereas in reality, it might be better if it was just one beat. If this moment started 1 beat before as a listening experience and stuff.
Yeah, if it pauses for 2 seconds, you're gonna think the CD's skipping.
Yeah. So it's like a completely like different kind of thing. But on those movies, the problem, a good problem and a bad problem, is that Ben Burtt was overseeing a ton of the sound mix, and Ben Burtt prioritized sound effects over score. So like while it's badass when the movie starts with the boom boom boom, like the cannons going and stuff like that, if you watch the opening of Revenge of the Sith, it's actually masterfully done, but at the same time, it's very bizarre, like when the music does kick in. And it's because,
especially when Lucas's whole point is that you can watch the movie without dialogue, and I'm like, well, then you need the music. Like the music needs to be way more forefront than the sound effects.
Do you remember when McCollum and George were going around saying that they were going to release a a 6 film cut of the thing with no dialogue? It was going to be a silent film. Yeah. And then I remember buying the soundtrack to episode 3, and on it had a DVD bonus disc if you bought the very first one, and it essentially had that, but it was very half-assed.
Someone did a fan edit. So they went and there's a fan edit, like I used to go to fanedits.org, right? Mm-hmm. And so they made it old timey too, like in 12 frames per second and with the sepia tone, and they actually put up the cards, right? It's
yeah.
And it looks weird as hell with the
I hate sand. Yeah. This sand gets everywhere.
When you read it like that, you're like, I think it works, So someone made a silent movie edition based off that. But yeah, there is sort of a half-ass version of it on that DVD. I remember.
Yeah. See, I mean, and once again, I don't want to tell anybody what they should do with their time or what's fun for them or what's an artistic exercise that helps them become a better editor and filmmaker. I've never been super crazy about fan edits as much. Like fan films, I think, is a different concept. Fan edits have never really sat that well with me in a weird way. I'm all about spoiling films because it helps us enjoy them. At least it helps me enjoy them more. But
let's explain why, though. The reason why they're difficult to digest in any form is because taking out things that aren't properly set up don't improve the film. So true. If I go, hey, there's just a needless explosion in the movie, I'm going to cut that out. It's going to make it better. But they spend the next 30 minutes talking about blowing something up and you don't see it. That doesn't actually, the setup set up something that you cut out, or if there wasn't enough setup, cutting that out doesn't change the fact that there's no amount of editing you can do to the Matrix sequels to make them more like the first Matrix movie. The sequels stand on their own as they are. However, there is one fan edit called the Superman Deja Vu edit, which I watched, which takes the Lester Superman 2 and the Donner Superman 2, right? And it makes a cut where Nod and them show up to Earth. Superman goes out, fights them, and what he does is he realizes he can't win, so he spins around the Earth before they show up, goes out in space, and throws out the bomb and thinks they're done with it, never has to worry about them. Then he becomes human.
1 sec. And then, take over 1 sec.
And then he becomes human and falls in love with Lois, becomes human, and it still happens. The sequence happens in another way where Lois is on the Eiffel Tower, and then he blows up the nuclear bomb, and they still come to Earth, but he doesn't know. So there's that scene later on in the film when Christopher Reeve is human, he gets that bar fight and he gets his ass kicked, and he's looking at the TV and he goes, he tried to tell me and I wasn't listening. And Lois goes, you couldn't have known. How could you have known? No, he knew. Because the whole question of Superman 2 is, look, if they show up, why don't they just spin around the Earth and stop them? So this edit does that, and he realizes that I can't interfere with the course of human history. Just because I can manipulate time doesn't mean I'm going to stop these things from happening. I have to take responsibility. It's the only edit I've ever seen where I'm like, this is the point of the film. It is actually superbly, look, the quality of some of that footage isn't as great, right? They have to use the footage that we have available, but the edit tells the thing that I've always wanted from those two films. Other than that, they're mostly all just experimental, fun, adventures and editing.
Yeah. And I feel more weird about, or less weird, I should say, if people were to make fan edits of the Disney era, because with Lucas, I feel like Auteur Theory makes a little bit more sense when he's making his own highly expensive independent films outside of a studio system. But I also think it's a little bit different when they're making them in the Disney structure And it's like, well, what do you expect? What did you sign on to make when you decided to make a Star Wars film with Disney? But not that anybody is necessarily fighting that. Even the people who've been kicked or walked, doesn't seem like they're really begrudging it too much. It's they kind of seem to
I
know what they're
really like
doing.
what Wan did with Empire Strikes Back
Mhm.
edit, which I didn't think you could do. But there's so many things Lucas and them claim to fix that they didn't, like the transparencies and the snow speeders. I remember like the
Yeah.
making of the DVDs when they came out in 2005. Like, we fixed this footage and you're watching it as they say it. I'm like, no, it's still transparent. You didn't fix anything. Like why would you say you fixed it? And you're looking at it's not fixed. It's still
No,
see-through.
no, it's
Like,
better, but it's not. Yeah, that was
yeah.
always just so weird to me.
Because they had to manually create a mask and rotoscope all the way through, and they just wouldn't do it for whatever reason.
Yeah, it was probably given a very small budget line, and that's just what it came down to.
Yeah.
Qui-Gon says, I think the Chosen One prophecy is more problematic than the Rule of Two. I agree with that in the sense that it's problematic in that they talk about this prophecy all the time and then don't ever actually really clearly say what it is. Like you get a couple of lines here, you kind of know it, but they don't want to write themselves into a corner, so they really leave it open. I hate that.
You know how you get these movies that come out every year where it's like, oh, why do we got 2 flood movies or 2 meteor movies, right? Like we got Deep Impact and Armageddon. That's weird how that happened. In 1989,
Dante's Peak.
Yeah,
Sorry.
right. We got 2 volcano films, right? And but like we got 2 Chosen One movies in 1999.
Yeah.
We got The Phantom Menace and The Matrix. Like literally, you are the one. And I remember when I saw The Phantom Menace, I'm like, I don't like it. It's Chosen One stuff. And then I saw The Matrix. I'm like, oh, so I mean, I guess it could be done in a way that is engaging, right? Like, I guess execution, Rob, execution, you know, like an idea. Everyone has ideas, but implementing them. So we did get 2 Chosen One things. I think it would have made more sense if Qui-Gon believed it, but the council, I know the council doesn't believe in any of that stuff. But if they were just like, hey man, that religion part of our religion is not what we do anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, we're not really a religion now. We're like a committee, you know? Should go back to worshiping trees or whatever you do, Qui-Gon, you know?
Qui-Gon says, I was about as conservative as a California could have been before joining the Navy. And now I'd say I'm socially liberal and fiscally conservative. Unless Biden wants to cancel my student loans. Fair enough. Yeah. I'm also like, yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, I think that an educated people makes for a stronger society. So cancel those student loans. If we're going to be a capitalist society, let's not have dead capital. And that's one of the problems that we have right now with billionaires. Like, you don't really hear about it that much, but the problem with your Jeff Bezos is that that's just a bunch of dead capital, never goes back into the system. You know, oh well, he hires people to wash his boats. Yeah, but it still doesn't actually, like, that's not enough. He's not paying the people who wash his boats enough to go back and not make dead capital. So if we fix the dead capital issue, if they fix the dead capital issue somehow, I don't care if they don't pay taxes. I mean, I want them to, but I don't care if they do, as long as if money is circulating through the hands of the people, then cool, you know. But
speaking of boats, whatever happened to Dooku's solar sail? Like,
right?
He literally has a space yacht. You know what I mean? Like, what is that guy? And he's part of the techno union. You know, the more I think about Count Dooku, the more I think he's just a Silicon Valley.
No, you're not wrong, dude. I was reading through some like UFO documents and stuff, just being a weirdo. And it was like back in the 90s, and there was a stuff about like essentially Dooku's ship in there, of it being a concept for space travel. And if what we're seeing, because like they would see like the disc part balloon out and then go away, and it actually like suggested like, is it a sail? And it was like a question, and I'm like, was Lucasfilm watching this stuff? Like, was George Lucas getting this stuff fed to him? Were there people in the government talking to George Lucas about, you know, what was up? And
I always wonder too, like, is this like, didn't Lando have a yacht in the Heir to the Empire books? Like, was that? I was like, what's the difference between a yacht and a Corellian freighter? I don't understand. Like, what would that mean in Star Wars?
It's the Lady Luck. That's what it was
The
called.
lady, look at you, man. Like you would do well on the
Yeah.
Schmodown. So
It looks stupid. I was actually invited to be on it a long time ago. And one of the guys who runs it, who like I have no ill feelings against him necessarily about it, but it was like he was like, after like the last minute, like I had gone and hired a babysitter to do it and everything. So like, I had like babysitter taking care of I could go to it. And at the last minute, they're like, hey, we hear that there's some beef with Star Wars Newsnet. You need to squash that now. And I'm in a bad mood. I'm just like, fuck you.
well,
and that was
the last
it.
time I was at E3, I met Dorian and Markia
Mhm.
in the press out room. I was there with a video game magazine I helped produce, and I was there as a game developer, which is a weirdly weird experience. But
Right.
I made friendly with them. I was like, dude, I really love the Schmodown. You guys. So they let me go. They invited me to the taping. It's the one where they dressed up as Marty McFly and Doc Brown,
Okay.
right? Like I think it was Gray Drake and and her teammate like dressed up as them.
Right.
So that was fun to watch. But yeah, I mean like that's an interesting like so I was there with Mark Fernandez and Harloff and all them, and it's interesting, you know, when you walk in. That was like I'm not big on celebrities, but it was weird seeing everyone you watch on TV in a single room
Yeah.
at one time. Like that is a little like you're looking around like everyone's here. You know, like this is
Yeah.
odd. Yeah, it is a weird feeling.
No, and I'm not knocking any. I would never knock anything about that because I think that like that whole thing brings a bunch of people into something and like they all have fun. So like it's like I don't knock it. At the same
Right.
time, I've always had this weird hang up about sports and competition in that kind of format with film or with nerd stuff and music. Like, and it started for me with
Right.
music. Like music isn't a competition. You know what I mean?
Well,
It's
they
it's
gauge
weird.
your level of fandom based on how much esoteric stuff you can conjure up at the last second.
Yeah,
Right? Like that means you're a better fan. Like is it?
and then it has to do with like how much can you do under pressure and how you
Right.
know and like once again though I'm not saying anything. I don't care if they all hate me or they love me. I don't give a shit. But what I am trying to say is that like if they have fun, cool. For me though, like that kind of stuff has always been like I don't know. It's not really for me. I was just more like, yeah, I guess I'll do this for the exposure. And then they were like, you need to make up with these people who are mad about you about something else one of your friends did. And I'm just like,
I
fuck
know.
you. But that's just a
I know, that's
personality.
ridiculous.
It's a personality defect in me that I shouldn't have said that to him. So one of these days I'll tell him, hey man, I'm sorry I said that to you when I
Yeah.
remember.
Well, I mean,
But
like at the same time, humans are humans, you know? So
yeah.
I mean, I don't know, man. Like that's a situation where I just think like treat people like they're your friends and not like an employee, maybe, you know, like treat them like
Yeah.
treat them like you would treat a random stranger with utmost respect,
Right.
you know, and not like an employee you think you can boss anywhere. I would always recommend, you know, like there's a problem in the military where or in any form of leadership where sometimes people they're your buddy, they're like normal, then when they get put up to a leadership position where they feel everyone's looking at them, they feel like they have to like boss people around or get a
Right.
little bit more you know, sheriff kind of like, and it's like not really, man.
Yeah.
There was one guy, speaking of handling pressure, there was one guy who appeared on the show, I think only once or twice. I haven't watched it in a while, but his name was Answers Man. So his gimmick was he didn't get anything right, but he's like, no, questions man was it? He's like, no, I answered the questions, or like I gave you answers. I'm Answers Man. Like they weren't the right ones, but they were answers. I was like, that is the best way around the pressure. Like, you get to have a great gimmick and not know anything. Oh man.
Remember when Cliff from Cheers was on Jeopardy? And like when
Yes.
he had to like answer, he's like,
Yes.
none of these people or who has never been in my kitchen was like it was like it was just how he got around their stupid thing. It was so dumb.
Yeah.
Carl asks us, you guys ever read Lee Brackett's original draft for Empire? Super weird and interesting. Cool to see which things they kept and which things they didn't. Yeah, I have read it, and it's super weird. Like that ending with Vader and Luke in the Starfield, we see reused in Rebels.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that was
I haven't read it in 20 years, but I remember it felt more like Splinter the Mind's Eye.
Yeah, it was
Kinda like,
definitely like I like the stuff like with like the ice castles and stuff. There was things about it that had a stranger, like more fantasy vibe to it. But yeah, and that's what gives us Minch. And one day we're going to see a whole little kingdom of little Minches. Thanks to her, I hope.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Tail says, hola. Please never change your avatar. Or if you do, just make it another animal one only. Dell says, I've been listening most of the time, just resting my eyes. We have a sleepy Dale these days. Have you noticed that? We've had a sleepy Dale. But that's okay, Dale. As long as you're here and we're giving you weird nightmares about democracy and the fall of your republic, that's cool.
Well, him and Tucker, are fighting evil, so they're probably tired all the time.
But yeah,
or him and Chip are, out having adventures, so he's probably tired.
Dude, today went fast. It's already 2 hours and 4 minutes. So I think we're going to call this a day. And it is blistering hot in my room, even though I cannot light my room no matter how hard I try with this equipment. I think it's my camera is a little bit white.
The white balance is on auto. We should work on that. The white balance is on auto.
Yeah, so I don't have any
properties, and there is a property somewhere in there.
I'm on a Mac, so hopefully there is. I would have.
Yeah, it has some form of properties. We got to figure that out, but it's auto white balancing. That's why.
Yeah, because boy, hello, my name is Jason Ward, and I'm your cis white male.
You know what it feels like? It feels like you're on the front end of these beams, right?
Right. Yeah. Oh, dude, that's spice in Star Wars, dude, and I am rolling on the spice, bro. I'm literally like. So good old Doomcock, aka Mike Zero number 2, posted another video today about how Disney plans on replacing the sequel trilogies in the What If style universe. Yeah, I that must be true then.
Yeah. Mike Zero has this covered. Get it?
The last 2 weeks in the room. Yeah. Well, I think you're going to be okay, Dale. At least I hope so. And yeah, don't worry. They're not gonna retcon anything while they're still making money off of it. Can you imagine you were a licensee? Can you imagine how pissed your guys would be if you guys were in the middle of making products for stuff that they were just about to retcon? Like in a race?
That happened to us.
Did it happen to you?
I'll wrap this up on a story, right? This happened to us with The Good Dinosaur.
Oh yeah.
So Pixar's The Good Dinosaur. We got The Good Dinosaur in the Lego Movie style guides and like debriefing the same day. Right. And I remember being like thoroughly impressed. I never knew Spaceman had a name from Lego. And then we got to The Good Dinosaur and it was all about these Amish dinosaurs. Like went way into the Amish dinosaur culture.
Yeah.
And right down to his dad had an Amish dress get up with the beard and the whole thing. And we were like, how do we put a bunch of Amish dinosaurs on it? Like, like you're trying to figure out like, this is very preschoolish. I mean, all right, what age group? Like, we want this boy's 8 to 10. And I'm like, all right, like, and it really wasn't about the cave kid being like his pet dog.
Okay.
Like, it was more like the dinosaur wanted to be something and his father didn't. It was more like Footloose with dinosaurs in a way. Like, I don't want to use that because they're going to be like, MakingStarWars.net says that Footloose with dinosaurs was the original Good Dinosaur. No, but that's like the feeling you got. The town wanted the kids. Oh.
Spoilers, guys. I got some spoilers for you. The Good Dinosaur was Footloose with dinosaurs. You heard it here first from me. It was all Kevin Bacon.
I'm trying to think of the dinosaur pun name I can make for Kevin Bacon. Baconsaurus, Kevin. So I don't know. Like there's something there. But it was a total thing, and we developed for it. And then they were like, yeah, we're not doing any of that. Like,
oh, shit.
What do you mean we're not doing any of it? And it was just like, you could think probably 3 to 6 months of development, of just gets chucked in the old trasher,
Yeah.
That just, and it's not us because the artists in the pit, right? This was a job we went into. This isn't something you do from home.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you're thinking like, well, we got paid. What do we care? The suits are like, we had them waste time, like doing this, like this is ridiculous and someone needs to pay for this. Like that is a major problem. And I got to imagine, I wasn't there for it. I got to imagine the same thing happened with Solo with the delays, and I got to imagine it'd be very similar.
Well, I know people who worked on all of them. And the biggest hit that most companies took was believing that Finn was the main character and overproducing Finn products out the butt. And then it was Rey. And then they got crapped on for not making Rey products because she was a girl.
That happens all the time.
They were told not to. They were literally told to make Finn stuff. Finn was to be, they decided to use Finn as a red herring. And I would not, and I'm sure that John Boyega is aware of this. And it's one of the things that he's talking about when he's sort of not saying it all, but he's going like, I'm not happy with things that they did. I think that is one of them. So yeah, but we will come back tomorrow and we'll talk about Star Wars with a new topic and some news breaks. We will talk about that. We were supposed to talk about some behind the scenes thing that's coming, but with Luke, but I was just going to make a bunch of deep fake jokes. So I think
it sounds like dick jokes as deep fake jokes, right?
Deep fake jokes. And so yeah, we'll definitely probably talk about that tomorrow. And if you want to support the channel, you can become a channel member on youtube.com. And if you want to just support the channel, but also get audio versions, because that's easier for you to take in, or you want to listen to it while you're driving or something like that, I upload them every day to the Patreon, audio only. And hopefully the audio is legible today. And you can get those for being a Patreon supporter. So either way, 2 ways to support the channel, whichever way works for you. And if you can't support the channel, totally cool. I understand. It's trying times, weird times. But I just I appreciate everybody who comes into the chat and hangs out with us. And hopefully, as time goes on this week, we'll be able to have more interactions with you guys in the chat. But we've kind of had a focused discussion today that just kind of went where it went. But may the force be with you, Mr. Dale, who says, may the force be with you always, with you all always. And we will see you guys tomorrow. Sound good? All right. Then you know what that means. It's my favorite part. This dumb ending.
It's not about spaceships. It's not about spaceships.